Welcome Home, a podcast for veterans, about veterans by veterans, is a project of Willing Warriors and the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run.
Good morning. I'm Larry Ziliaks, your host, Director of Culinary Services here at the Warrior Retreat. And today our guest is Chris Duffley. He is with the American Red Cross here in Northern Virginia. And we're going to talk about the services that the Red Cross provides beyond blood services and disaster relief, which is what they're most known for. But they do a lot in veteran service organization landscape. They're involved with a lot of programs with veterans and a lot of programs with active duty soldiers. So, Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate it and appreciate the chance to be here today. Like Larry said, I'm Chris Duffley, and I'm the Director of Military and Veteran Programs, which we call our Service to Armed Forces business line in the Red Cross. And I've been doing this work for about 9 years now.
And your office is in Fairfax.
So our regional headquarters office is in Fairfax.
Okay.
Our region covers Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and Northern Virginia.
Okay. And how many regions are there in the country? 4, 5, 6?
There are 50 different regions like ours. Some regions cover multiple states like ours does, and some larger states like California and Texas have 3, 4, 5 regions.
Okay. And how long have you been with the Red Cross?
9 years now. I started as a volunteer in 2014 and then transitioned to the paid staff. And I've been in this role in sort of a few different capacities.
Okay. Which of all the jobs you've had with the Red Cross you like the best?
This job, when they hired me for it, I said, this is like my dream job. I get to stay involved. So I'm a veteran myself, an Air Force veteran, and pre and post 9/11, and had a lot of deployed time and transitioned off of active duty into the civil service government. And my job was good, but I needed something different, and I didn't want to completely leave the community I came from, and found this opportunity with the Red Cross, and it's been a great fit.
Right. How many people work out of the office? I mean, you have what these branches are. There's some blood services, there's disaster relief, and then there's your line.
Yeah. So, for example, in our Fairfax office, we've got a blood donation center on the second floor, the top floor, and so people that are donating blood can come in, appointment-based system, and they come in and can donate anytime. The main floor is where the chapter is essentially headquartered, and so we've got a fundraising team, we've got a disaster response team, we've got our executive director, and then our regional chief executive officer that have space in that room, and then myself, and then our volunteer services team. So 90% of the Red Cross's workforce are volunteers, and it's even a little more in the work that I do. Mm-hmm. And so the volunteer services team essentially helps us to recruit and onboard and just recognize, keep track of all the great work our volunteers do.
Mm-hmm. And how many volunteers do you use, say, in a month or for your program?
Just in the service to the armed forces, the military and veteran programs, we have over 1,000 volunteers in our region. There are a couple hot spots, sort of in Northern Virginia at Fort Belvoir,
right.
At the A.T. Augusta Military Medical Center there,
mm-hmm.
and then throughout the garrison. And a lot of those volunteers also support other sort of outreach in the community in Northern Virginia, and then the Marine Corps base down at Quantico.
Quantico? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a typical day look like for you? What are your programs? What do you do?
There isn't a typical day for most Red Crossers, but myself included. And that's one thing that I like about the job is there's a lot of variety. And so my team on the paid side is spread, 2 in the Baltimore, Maryland area that cover sort of central Maryland and in Delaware. And then 1 that covers D.C. and southern Maryland, 2 that are based out of the medical center at Walter Reed and up in Bethesda, and then 2 that are based out of the Fort Belvoir. And so between Fairfax and our national offices in D.C., which is sort of my national support team, they work out of that space. We do a lot of events in D.C. at that space as well, and then just supporting the team and out in the field.
Okay. And so you've got the great volunteers, amazing support, the staff here and at headquarters. What are the programs? What services are you providing to veterans?
Yeah, so there's three really core mission areas, and then I'll mention a couple of extras as well. So the Red Cross has a congressional charter that dates back to, I think, 1919, and that congressional charter. So the Congress says, Red Cross, we need you to do this work. The first is disaster response, which is a whole separate line of business, and the other two things that they task us to do are to act as a means of communication between the United States public and the armed forces. And we do that through a network called the Hero Care Network, which I can talk a little bit more about. So that's one of the foundations of the work we do. And then the second is to take care of our nation's war wounded or wounded, ill, and injured service members. And we do a lot of that work through our programs at the military and VA hospitals.
Okay. All right. So you have a presence at all the military hospitals around the country?
I wouldn't say all, but most.
Most of them?
Right. And so, for example, in our region, we have over 500 volunteers that support our programs at Walter Reed, up in Bethesda, probably around 200 at Fort Belvoir, another 50 to 75 at Malcolm Grow Medical Center at Joint Base Andrews.
Oh, yeah.
And then a couple in the Pentagon at the clinic, a couple at Quantico in the clinic. So spread out throughout area medical facilities.
And what is their primary role there, say, at Walter Reed?
That's a great question, and their roles are varied. So of that 500-person team, we've got volunteers. About 100 are licensed medical providers, doctors, nurses, mental health providers, clinicians that practice to the full extent of their licensure. And so you can have a surgeon who is doing a surgery on a patient as a Red Cross volunteer, or a nurse who is working in the ICU who is a Red Cross volunteer. And of course, the commands love that because they're getting professional, top-notch medical people who are volunteering their time. But we've got some other big programs are our therapy program. So we've got a volunteer who's a Vietnam veteran by the name of Steve Peth. He has a team of 75, 80 volunteers that support just the therapy department, occupational and physical therapy at Walter Reed. And so a lot of those patients that are dealing with physical injuries go through. And so his volunteers, and so Steve and his team, they support everything from just helping the therapists out sort of as an assistant in a way, wiping down mats, setting up the exercise balls, what's our next routine? What's our next patient going to need? We've got a really cool one-of-a-kind program, as far as I know, a remotely piloted aircraft, a drone program where we have volunteers who are sort of experts in that field, and they're networked in the drone community. And then so they've had kits of these really nice and elaborate drone aircraft that the recovering warriors, they build, they go out and fly. They do different games and activities. It helps in coordination, problem solving, team building, and it's a whole lot of fun. We actually had to get a special waiver from the FAA to be able to fly in
DC. Yeah. I was going to say that could lead to a lot of problems for sure. Well, that's great. Let me just go back to this thing about medical professionals as volunteers. That just kind of took me off guard. I just always thought it was just retirees handing out blankets and candy and things like that.
And we do a lot of that.
Yes.
And our pet visitation team. So we have volunteers, human volunteers with four-legged friends, and they are some of our most popular volunteers. And there's about 25 at Walter Reed and maybe another 20 or 25 for Belvoir. So they go out and do a visit with patients, with staff. They're really important for taking care of the staff, just stress relief and relaxation. But back to the professional volunteers, a lot of them are retired military, but they want to keep serving the community they came from, or they have existing network of patients or relationships, and enables them to keep practicing medicine, but they do it completely as volunteers.
And is there any kind of a commitment there? Could a doctor say within their practice, maybe talk to their partners and say, hey, I'd like to once or twice a month go down and help at the VA, or is it just...
So the one intricacy of this is it's only on the military side right now. I don't think we have those types of relationships completely in place with the VA side.
Okay.
Our national headquarters is sort of working that
Sure.
at a national level. On the military side, as long as that medical provider goes through the same qualifications and background checks that any physician or nurse would have to go through. So they have to go through credentialing, licensure, verification, and then all the normal trainings on HIPAA and information protection, and that any person who works in the hospital would need to go through. And they can volunteer 40 hours a week or 4 hours a month, and it's all great.
Wow. Well, if you're listening and you're a doctor or a nurse, a medical professional, think about volunteering to the Red Cross. I mean, that's just totally new to me. Okay, so that's the volunteers and the programs there. Were there any other programs?
Yeah, so let me go back and talk about the Hero Care Network a little bit. That's one that a lot of service men and women, veterans, have some experience with. It's the Red Cross messages. And so when there's a service member or a family that has an emergency and that service member may not be close to home, the Red Cross acts as a neutral and independent third party that validates and vets the nature of the emergency. Mm-hmm. So if mom was back home in Northern Virginia and son was stationed over in Korea, mom has a medical emergency, Red Cross calls. This is part of a network of call centers that are 24/7, 365. So anytime there's an emergency, we have people there to work it. We call the hospital, we verify the emergency, we craft a formal message that we send to the unit command. That command, it's ultimately the commander or first sergeant's decision whether to grant and approve emergency leave. But as part of that, if emergency leave is approved, a lot of time the service member may not have the funding for an expensive last-minute ticket to come back to the States. And so we work with the military aid societies. We actually work on their behalf to purchase those tickets. Saturday night, if we need to get a ticket for somebody, the aid societies aren't necessarily open at that time.
Right.
They entrust us to work on their behalf.
So I've experienced that aspect of the Red Cross firsthand when I was stationed in Guam. I remember, I think it was my first sergeant said, you need to go down to the Red Cross office. They have a message for you. And so I did, and an uncle had passed away. My mother had just sent a message through. It's extremely valuable service, a quick way to communicate, especially when back then you couldn't just pick up the phone. It was hard to call a lot of these places, military bases especially. You get into some countries where there's just no getting through, really. And with the nature of modern communication, cell phones and text message, a lot of times the Red Cross message isn't the first notification anymore, but it's what the command needs to get the emergency leave process going and let that service member go to come back and be with their family in a time of emergency. It needs to be some sort of official notification, not take little Bobby's word for it because he wants a vacation.
The other thing we have locally, we have local volunteers who follow up with each of those families that's had an emergency. And we also work with veterans who might be experiencing sort of a longer term crisis, dealing with homelessness, dealing with employment issues. And so our local volunteers connect with those individuals, see what the need is, make sure everything is going okay, and do a lot of information referral. In some cases, we can provide some limited direct assistance to those families and veterans, but a lot of times it's just getting them connected with the right folks.
Right. Local resources that can use. Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great reason. I know we've met through the collaborative, the Northern Virginia Collaborative and the Northern Virginia Veteran Suicide Coalition, which are great organizations for that very reason, because now you're introduced to a lot of really great VSOs and professionals that can provide services that you can't. There's nothing worse than answering the phone and talking to a veteran or an active duty service member and not being able to help.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to endorse the Veterans Collaboratives as well. Yeah. Obviously, it's a chance for us to come together and share what great work our two organizations are doing, but it's also a way to get connected with county, other nonprofits, VSOs, MSOs that are out there and sort of build our own resource network.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems in the veteran service organization space is that there's a lot of resources out there. It's just the veterans have trouble finding them. and it just getting the word out is really the biggest challenge. But hey, that kind of a organization works because I can tell people, I can refer them to you, I can refer them to Amy's group or to the VA, so there's just a lot of resources available. I think there was a third program you want to talk about.
There's a third sort of main program, and then a couple, one other auxiliary one that I do want to make sure to mention. So we also have a program. It's our behavioral health workshops, resiliency workshops, and those are led by volunteers, again, who are licensed mental health clinicians. Could be counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, who are also volunteering and donating their time. And they offer a series of workshops. I think we have 7 for adults. We've got 2 mind and body workshops, 4 for teens and kids that are military connected. And actually a new one that was just released is one for the children of military caregivers, military veteran caregivers. And so obviously when there's sort of a caregiving situation, it affects the whole family. And so we wanted to be able to give the children the adequate attention and resources. And so in partnership with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, we developed that workshop just this year.
Nice.
The topics are sort of communication skills, stress management, diffusing anger, really like fundamental foundational topics. The workshops are an hour to an hour and a half. They're free. They're confidential. So what's said in the group doesn't go outside the group. And we offer the workshops virtually in sort of Teams or Zoom, but also in person. And we come to a partner or client's location. It might be at the DCVA. It might be on an installation somewhere. And we offer those workshops, and they've been really successful.
I'm forward thinking towards the Grand Lodge.
We would love to partner with you on that, and it also would get our Red Crossers more aware of the retreat here and the great work that's being done.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about how we can bring more services west. From Fairfax East, everything is concentrated. The vet center, unfortunately, is in Alexandria, which on paper it looks nearby, but in the real world it's not. It's an hour and a half away. So I'm always thinking about ways we can bring services and things west to this sort of the Shenandoah Valley area and out where we are in western Prince William County, which is underserved because the veterans just don't want to do battle on 66. They don't want to drive for an hour and a half or more to get, counseling. And by the time they get there, they're going to be all jacked up from the commute. So half of whatever they're going for is just going to be anger about having to go through all that. So, boy, if we could have these things out here, it'd be great.
I know firsthand from going into the DCVA Medical Center that there's no easy way to get to the DCVA from Virginia. And by the time you get there, you're like, you got to sit down and get your vitals taken and your blood pressure's up, your heart rate's up. And it's like,
Yeah,
I agree.
I don't go. I mean, I go to Martinsburg. It's 3 times as long, but it's the same amount of time. And it's a prettier drive. So,
well, I know a lot of talking about the western part of Northern Virginia, Loudoun County, a lot of the Loudoun County veterans choose to go to Martinsburg as well. And so they're sort of split between the 2 different VAs. And we are involved in the Community Veterans Engagement Board there in Loudoun County.
Yeah, that's a great organization. Tom Grant's group.
Tom and his team. And we've got a volunteer who is intimately engaged in that.
Great. Yeah, that was one of the first groups I ever went to. They have a very strong group up there of all sorts of VSOs that are operating in Loudoun County and in the area. Really, really good people. So talk about some of the other little programs that really make an impact.
The other really important one that I want to talk about, and it's nationally centered with the Red Cross. It's called the Military Veteran Caregiver Network, the MVCN, and it's led by a friend of mine who started in the sort of as a caregiver herself. Her name is Melissa Como, and she's built this network to now include thousands and thousands of caregivers with sort of a peer education focus, so peer-to-peer support. She's a caregiver. She's been working with the VA. She's been working with TRICARE. She's been working with military hospitals to get her service person well.
Right.
There's all sorts of speed bumps and ins and outs and roadblocks. And so having somebody who's worked the process, who can give you those tips, or who can just be there to listen to the struggles that are part of everyday life as a caregiver. And so to be a part of that network, the network is run by caregivers for caregivers. And so you have to apply to be a part and talk about what your role is as a caregiver. And, it could be for a spouse, it could be for a child, it could be for a parent, it could be for a friend. Mm-hmm. And so all are welcome, but you have to be sort of focused in that caregiving space, and really great part of the record.
Is it strictly from military?
It is for military and veteran connected. Yeah. Yes.
And is it funded by the Red Cross?
It is.
Okay.
Yes. It started sort of as an external organization, and probably about 5 years ago, it just made sense to sort of join, and it made sense with where the Red Cross wanted to go, mm-hmm. and where the military veteran caregiver network wanted to, expand their reach.
Yeah.
And so being a part of the Red Cross has really helped.
I bet. Yeah. That's great. Well, it gives them national exposure.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome. And do they have a web page? Are there resources available?
Yeah, so it all starts at redcross.org,
right?
www.redcross.org. There you can sign up to donate blood. You can sign up to be a volunteer. You can sort of see more specifically in our military and veteran programs, and including the Military Veteran Caregiver Network online, and sort of read more in depth about each of those programs.
And there'd be a way on there to, I guess, join if you were a new caregiver?
Absolutely.
Okay. And are they sort of like a mentor program where they can walk people through the processes and stuff?
Yes, there are a lot of sort of online peer support groups, but there are also, you can be assigned a mentor that can sort of help you go through the process and step by step.
Wow, that's huge because it's so hard on families. It's just so hard.
It's just daunting sometimes, and just the amount of details like appointments and paperwork and insurance and all those things that go into getting a person healthy and well.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Wow. That's a great program. I've never heard of that. And maybe what we should do is have her come talk about it.
We probably should.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have you take care of that. Hook her up with me, and we'll get her. Is she local here?
She's not local.
She can do something over the phone.
Over the phone would work, or she might be able to. She does come out this way to do events and meetings. So maybe sometime when she's here, she could come out, or we could do it virtually. But I'd love to introduce you.
Oh, that'd be great. What's the most important thing people should know about the Red Cross?
That we're here to help, and that our organization is sort of run by the power of volunteers, and we have volunteers integrated at every level of our organization. And the reason the Red Cross has been so successful, dating back to Clara Barton on the Civil War battlefields, mm-hmm. mobilizing the power and generosity of volunteers.
If you're looking for something to do and you want to volunteer, we'd love to have you volunteer here, but we'd also love to have you volunteer for the Red Cross. There's nothing that says you can't volunteer for 2 or 3 different organizations, number one. Number two is when you're working with the Red Cross, you're working with an organization that has a long-standing history. It's a reputable organization. It's professionally run. It's not a fly-by-night operation. It's not frustrating to volunteer for the Red Cross. The roles are pretty specific. The instructions you get are pretty specific. The jobs that they have available and the roles that you can perform as a volunteer are extensive.
So overseas, we end up doing sort of a lot of partnership. So this is one other thing I wanted to highlight is that we have Red Crossers who are deployed pretty much everywhere our U.S. military forces are. So we have about 30 Red Crossers who are deployed right now in Eastern Europe, supporting the Ukrainian situation.
Right.
Still in the Middle East and Kuwait and Iraq, in the Horn of Africa, supporting our deployed forces there, in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And so pretty much anywhere the U.S. military is, we have Red Crossers there to act as sort of the front lines when there's an emergency, but also to sort of do some of what the USO does to just bring a little comfort and care. Go into the Red Cross office after a long day and get a hot cup of coffee, or chill out in a nice chair and watch a DVD or whatever folks choose to do.
Wow. So think about volunteering or donating. When there's a crisis, the Red Cross is there almost immediately, and not only a big hurricane, but in your local neighborhood at a fire. If families are displaced, it's the Red Cross that shows up and it helps them.
Yeah, that's actually the number one type of disaster is home fires.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we're there while the firefighters are still there, but our job is to take care of the family and the people, make sure they have a place to stay, make sure they have food and clothing to get them through sort of that initial period, and then get them connected with the longer-term recovery resources.
Yeah. So that's just one aspect of it. When you see a major disaster, you're going to see the Red Cross there, but you're also going to see a lot of organizations that are going to somehow materialize out of nowhere, looking for donations to help the people of whatever disaster it is. And I would say stay away from those organizations. You don't know who they are. You don't know what they're going to do with their money. Give to the Red Cross. Just forget about all these others. Just give to the Red Cross, because you know that they are going to use your donation to support their mission for that emergency, that disaster. So you can't go wrong with either donating or volunteering to the Red Cross. They're a phenomenal organization. Chris, I want to thank you for coming in and just sitting down with us and telling us about that little known aspect of the Red Cross, which is all the services that they provide to the military.
Yeah, Larry, I really appreciate it. And obviously that's where my heart lies, but I oftentimes say that's the best kept secret in the Red Cross. And so that's part of my job and I appreciate this opportunity to get the word out. We were, as I said, we were founded on the Civil War battlefields, but people know us for disaster response and for blood drives and things of that nature, but not necessarily the work we've been doing for, 140 some years in supporting our military and veteran community.
I thank you. You guys just do amazing work. So really, I really appreciate it. For our listeners, we'll have another episode next Monday at 5 a.m. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can reach us at podcast@willingwarriors. Until then, thanks for listening.
The Welcome Home podcast is brought to you by Willing Warriors, a nonprofit organization serving active duty service members and veterans since 2012. To learn more, please visit our webpage at willingwarriors.org.